Hi, I'm Dr. Gaby Cora and welcome to my whole food plant-based nutrition series, starting off with part 1 today. We all have a story behind adopting a whole food plant-based diet, and let me share mine with you. Back in February of 2015, I became 50 years old and I had my whole family visit me. My parents were in Miami, my husband and my kids were present there as well as my brother and his partner. Now, my dad is central to all of what my story is about. So let me backtrack a little bit and tell you a little bit more about him. Back in June 2014, he had also visited us, and as you can see, he's always been a very, very strong guy. Always loved gardening, he has always been extremely active, and he's always also been used to carrying a lot of weight on his shoulders. As you can see here, he was a happy-go-lucky, trying to figure out everything that he could do, extremely active all the time. Now, in October 2014, he was actually moving from a very large apartment where he lived for about 30 years into a much smaller place. So here he is really, lifting again, big things during that move. Now, it was during that time that he started to have some vague aches and pains, and we attributed all that to maybe older age as well as a lot of, moving heavy stuff around. However, about a week after my birthday, he had a very, very acute pain in the back, so we decided to explore this a bit further. Unfortunately, what we found was that there were several lesions, particularly in the back. There was one affecting his lumbar vertebrae, L3, but then we also found out that he had several metastases here, including, you can see one here in the right lower lung area, the lobe area, T9, there was another vertebra affected there as well. He also has tumors in his liver. There were 3 or 4 lesions found there as well. You can see T9 here again. And the sternum area, really that front part of his chest was what was bothering him the most. Now, interestingly here, there were also affected in the right ilium as well as the right sacrum as well. So there were several metastases. We found out that the original lesion was a melanoma he had in the eye about 30 years ago, which was taken out with no trouble. He had continued to have all his skin checkups, but again, because he's always been extremely active, no one really suspected that there could be something like this going on. This is another PET CT scan where you can see the lesion here in the sternum area, the other lesions that were really so bothersome to him, like you can have here the thoracic one, and here in the lumbar region. Here you can have it also in the iliac crest as well as the sacrum area. Now, interestingly, during this exam, we not only found that, again, he had metastasis, probably a secondary, there was a biopsy confirming the melanoma, but we also found that he had some calcifications in his coronary arteries. He had already had a stent a couple of years earlier and actually has been taking antihypertensive medications as well as medications for his high cholesterol, as well as aspirin. So we knew that, and interestingly, he was concerned about having coronary artery disease in addition to this. So this is just a picture of the right coronary artery, and then you have the left main coronary artery dividing into 2, feeding the heart with good blood. So in his case, you can see here, on this one, you can't see it so well, but there's a calcification right here, and maybe on this one you can really see it with these two marks there as well. So in the meantime, imagine we had this very devastating news. We were not happy in any shape or form, really trying to figure out what to do next. And in our regular, habitual way, we try to continue to do things as much as we possibly could, like including eating, eating, and eating. This is a picture with my dad and my husband while we were trying to have some time to chat really after the diagnosis. So it wasn't a very, very happy time there. Now, if you see in the back here, you can also see we have an Argentine grill actually at home. So we were always very used to celebrating with a lot of meat products as well. On this other celebration also in March, my family is reunited. It was my husband's birthday then, also his 50th birthday. And as you can see, we're all here. You will not see, but my dad is on a wheelchair there. He was not able to walk or ambulate as well, and he was very uncomfortable, mostly with pain. So we try to make sure that he didn't have any pressure on his hip area or on his lumbar area. Now, in the meantime, my dad was going to go back to Argentina and start his treatment, particularly radiation therapy, which was fully covered there at the time. So my brother came back from LA to accompany him during the flight back, and here you have them going back. So it's not only that they flew back to Argentina. Argentina is really, really very famous for its beef and for its amazingly tasty meat products. So here you have my dad sitting with my brother there as well, everything fried. So you can see my brother was a pescatarian at the time, so he's eating some fried fish. Here you have some French fries. Now my dad is actually doing it all. So he has the beef there, and he has sunny side up with eggs as well. So, you know, trying to keep a nice smile on his face. In the meantime, we were trying to see if he could get started therapy with monoclonal antibody treatment in Argentina, but it ended up being a no-go. So I had gone to visit him and accompany him during the first infusion, but when it was a no-go, I brought him back to the States. And this is where he got the first and second infusion of one of the newer monoclonal antibodies for metastatic melanoma. And we continued to eat, and play as much as we could. So the treatment starts for my dad. Here you can see him in a picture while he's resting during the infusion, during his first infusion. You see here some other pictures of eating. As I was sharing with you earlier, we have an amazing Argentine grill at home. This is my husband as a good asador, or Argentine gaucho, as I usually call him. So as you can see, you know, very well prepared in everything that has to do with meat products. Another feast here. My husband's a fantastic chef, and you can see some meat there as well as prosciutto. So you have prosciutto di Parma, you know, never lacking some meat products on our table. So I just want to show you how well or not well we used to eat at home, whether or not we looked okay. In regards to play, let me share one of the experiences here. I had to go to Orlando to give a talk, and I brought my dad with me. And here we are at Disney, loving all the plants always. And what you don't see in this picture, and you see on this picture, is that I carried him on the wheelchair at Epcot most of the day. So he stood up for the pictures, and then he really had to be on the chair to try to avoid long walks or any kind of pressure on his system. As you can see, always keeping a great smile on his face, and you know, I'm trying to keep the best of smiles on my face as well. Now, it was interestingly right after this that I came across a woman who shared with me her own history of her dad having melanoma. And when she asked me how my dad was doing, I mentioned that he was eating like a lion. He would eat everything. So she asked me, well, what does he eat? And I mentioned meat, fish, cheese, yogurt, everything that comes to his plate. He's a great eater. He was already putting some weight from everything that he was eating without having the activity. And then she blurted out, don't you know that what he eats may be feeding the cancer? So imagine you hear these words, no, I did not know, and, you know, inquired a little bit about what she meant, and she said, haven't you read the China study? I had not read the China study. I had not even heard about the China study. I inquired about whether it was an article that I could try to pull from the web. And as I started doing some more and more research, I not only ordered the China study so that I could read the whole book written by Dr. Campbell, but I also realized it may have been easier to just watch a documentary and get a little bit of a sense of what this China study was all about. So I got Forks Over Knives, and within the first 30 minutes that I started watching it, I invited my husband to watch it with me, and the rest is kind of history. But this is how we really got started, and where Drs. Campbell and Dr. Esselstyn were mentioned in the documentary as well. Dr. Esselstyn wrote Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, and I ordered this book as well. So I was scratching my head and going, like, as a physician of 25 years, how come I didn't know? That was one of the first questions that struck me. And this same question also impacted on my husband as well, who we've both been physicians for 25 years. We were really concerned about us not being more familiar with all this. My husband went to our home pantry and he took everything that we should probably not be eating in terms of being processed food or containing oils, sugars, or just too much fat or salty products. So we just got everything out here, and this is what was left, you know, in the beginning. So that was kind of interesting that we had to really get rid of so much stuff and really start over. But I wanted to really show you how difficult it was even for us, who were so used to eating pretty much of a healthy Western diet, and really shift our mindset altogether. So we decided to study it all. As I mentioned to you before, we watched the movie Forks Over Knives, we read the China study, we read Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by Dr. Esselstyn, but we also decided to go the extra mile. So we decided to meet all the masters themselves. And we met Dr. Campbell. Here we have a picture with Dr. Campbell. The first time we met, we've met him more than once and have had the opportunity and the pleasure to speak with him and learn from him directly. And basically what Dr. Campbell beautifully advocates for and really explains this concept is that there is a direct protein effect, animal protein effect, and correlated with liver cancer. So the original study was from India in the 60s, and it examined the effect at different levels of protein consumption and the development of aflatoxin-induced liver cancer in rats. Now, the initial hypothesis was that rats given a lower level of protein would be more likely to get liver cancer than rats that were fed a regular level of protein. So basically, that initial hypothesis was thinking that it was really not having enough protein that led to cancer. But instead, what was found was quite the opposite. The rats that were fed with 20% of protein were dead after during the completion of the studies, whereas those that were fed just 5% were all alive. Now, this was a striking difference from that original hypothesis. It really kind of killed it. So what Dr. Campbell decided to do was really to alternate between 20 and 5% of protein and exposing the rats to this. And what was found was that every time that the rats were given 20% of protein, their liver cancer chances increased. And every time that they got 5%, they decreased. And that if you had already been given 20 and were changed to 5, that was protective and you would get less cancer altogether. Now, this is groundbreaking. And there may be different times in which you may try to explore 5 or 20%, or that he did, and he found this consistently. So basically what he found was that there may be different phases of cancer. The first one is the initiation phase. The second one is promotion. The third one is progression of cancer. We all may have some cancer seeds at a certain point or another, and our immune system usually fights those off. However, with animal protein intake, what we do is really we expose those cancer cells to promote and grow. And that is the direct impact of animal protein on healthy cells or on cells that already have that mutation. This is very important because even if you may have some genetic predisposition, all those cells need to stay dormant, but by exposing those cells to animal protein, you really are pushing the chances of getting cancer altogether. Some other interesting studies that Dr. Campbell usually refers to are some in which you can see that the incidence of breast cancer doesn't just relate to that genetic predisposition. We have, for example, some very multi-ethnic groups living in the United States, and as you can see, the incidence of cancer is really high. What may seem as just high fat intake may actually indeed high animal protein intake. In this other slide that actually Dr. Lisle likes to present as well, you can see the percentage of deaths in red from heart disease and cancer in comparison to the percentage of calories from unrefined plant foods in other countries. So as you can see, countries where there's a lot of heart disease and cancer, there really is a lot of more unrefined plant food consumption versus the killer, these killer diseases. So that's very important to maintain on the background of our minds. Now, we also decided to meet with Dr. Esselstyn, and we've already met him in a couple of different situations. Here we are with him at Cleveland Clinic, where he has continued to educate both patients as well as physicians in terms of understanding the intimate relationship between animal protein and how it affects directly our vessels, provoking not only cardiovascular disease, but really affecting each and every vessel in our whole system. So his original study was back in the early 80s, and it was called A Strategy to Arrest and Reverse Coronary Artery Disease. This was a 12-year longitudinal study of a single physician's practice, basically it was, he really relied not only on some animal studies that he had read, but a lot of epidemiological data from around the world as well. His goal was to have the sickest of participants who had already needed triple vessel coronary artery disease or had had stents or other procedures done. Now, the participants at the time were 23 men with 1 woman with, again, severe triple vessel coronary artery disease. Their age range was from 44 to 68. And his goal was to maintain total serum cholesterol below 150 milligrams per deciliter, and to also maintain an LDL serum cholesterol below 80 as well. Now, in his original design, he decided to interview the patients and their spouses. He realized that it was extremely important to have the couple together to make this lifestyle transition. It's really very hard to do it if you want to do it on your own. It's not impossible, but it's really very, very hard to do it because you're going to feel very isolated from the community that means your own family. He also had bi-monthly clinic visits and asked all the patients to keep a diet diary. There were also periodic group gatherings, which he also attributed a lot of the benefit from. And he was really the physician leader in his participation. One of the most significant findings he had is that the fat craving was lost in 90 days. And this is very important and a very important concept that I think is really critical to being successful with this diet. If you continue to eat a lot of sugars, salt, or oils and add them to your diet, you're still going to miss them because you're going to be ingesting them all the time. And it's like, it's like being addicted to alcohol or drugs. The more that you continue to expose your whole body and your brain to them, the more that you're going to be craving for them as well. And from a baseline mean cholesterol of 237 in the beginning, what he found at year 5 and 12 years after was that that cholesterol dropped to 137 and 145. consistently. So, and this was one of the best ways in which Dr. Esselstyn could see if his patients were adhering to his dietary guidance. Basically, it's a way to know if you're really on the diet or if you're cheating. Now, interestingly, these 18 people who finished the protocol had 49 coronary artery events during the 8 years prior to this study, and none in the 17 compliant patients had any events during the 12 years after the study. Now, this is super significant, and honestly, there's no medication that does this. I wish they did, but they don't. In Dr. Esselstyn's work, he found consistently that the people who adhered to his diet had these significant findings on a PET scan of the heart. So basically, where you see that the blood does not flow well, there's complete restoration between 10 to 14 days after being on this diet. Now, this is just so significant, and honestly, it really doesn't happen with any of the statins or any of the other medications. Now, he also found the same thing, but here with an angiography, where you find here you have the diminished lumen within the vessel, and you can see how it's restored on the second one. Now, in this case, the second arteriography was done around 3 years after the first one was done. However, the findings are a lot earlier. This was just when this patient had the follow-up angiogram, so that is interesting as well. Now, we also decide to meet with Dr. Lisle. We love Dr. Lisle. He's amazing in how easily he explains many of the addictions that and the reasons why we may crave those sugars, the salt, and all the oils. So basically, Dr. Lisle wrote The Pleasure Trap. There's also videos that he has as well. And we also met Dr. Goldhammer as well. So the nicest thing about meeting Dr. Lisle, he's very down to earth, very easy to speak with. As you can see, I'm here chatting away. But what he proposes is this motivational triad, where we tend to do things that make us feel good, pleasurable activities, and a couple of great examples include food and sex. The second one is we try to avoid pain as much as we can. We really try to avoid feeling bad. And the third one is we tend to try to be very efficient with our energy. We try to conserve our energy or gain our energy, meaning if we need to go close by and grab a fruit, we may do that instead of going 10 steps further and grab another fruit. The problem is we may tend to have a lot of things closer to us that are very, very high in caloric content. And this is one of the things that he really advocates for. So for example, if it was so easy to just surround ourselves with food, this would be fantastic because these are the whole natural foods. However, the most popular foods are the ones that are super high in caloric intake. And we tend to have easy access to all of these, and they give us so much pleasure that it becomes extremely difficult for us to say, I'm not gonna eat meat anymore, or I'm not gonna use butter or yogurt or anything else, or even milk. Plus, all these habits have been so ingrained in us that contributes to even an additional layer of complexity there as well. And how do we escape the trap? Basically with knowledge. The more that you understand this negative cycle or how animal protein may impact upon your overall level of health, I believe it's going to be easier to try to do some of the things. So you can try to establish some of the changes little by little, or you can go cold turkey, or you can try to get hungry and don't eat. That may be one of the ways to do it. The other one is with juice fasting for a few days, and the other one is to just be locked up, which is one of the programs in which Dr. Lisle participates very actively. So in our case, we try to follow his guidance about acquiring all this knowledge. And so we decided to pursue a certification with Cornell, which is Dr. Campbell's nutritional program. It's a 6-week program in nutrition. We also attended Plantstock, which was organized by Dr. Esselstyn's son, Rip Esselstyn, who's done tons of work with many people. We also attended Dr. Esselstyn's program at Cleveland Clinic. We attended the Plantrition Project in California, where we were able to meet with so many like-minded physicians and practitioners that it was an amazing opportunity. And there was a lot of self-study as well. Here you have my husband explaining the B12 cycle here, as well as other vitamins and the impact that we may have from either eating animal-based food versus vegetable-based food. So we talked with Dr. Colin Campbell, Dr. Thomas Campbell, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, Dr. Doug Lisle, Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Craig McDougall, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, and many, many more. And we also learned tons from Dr. John McDougall, Jeff Novick, Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Ron Wise, Dr. Michael Greger. You can find they have tons of videos on YouTube, and you can really go into what each one of them really advocates for. So there's a lot of trying to be brokers of information on my end here as well. Here's my certificate from plant-based nutrition from Cornell that I was referring to with Dr. Campbell. And we are also learning from plant-based chef Chad Sarno. Here we have a picture with him. We met at the Plantrition Project, and we look forward to going through his 6-month training program for chefs. So basically, we are on a whole food plant-based nutrition program or lifestyle, as I would like to call it. So we understand the relationship between animal protein, its role in causing inflammation, its role in perpetuating chronic diseases, the impact this has on our vascular system, and the protection that plant-based nutrition offers instead. And this is just an example of how animal products may impact upon our health and wellness. Here you can have some problems that are derived from excessive angiogenesis, and some others that derive from insufficient angiogenesis. But basically, going from head to toes, it could be anything from exacerbating migraine headaches, having a higher propensity for stroke, Alzheimer's disease, depression or anxiety issues, rosacea as well, multiple sclerosis, infections, cancer, big time, atherosclerosis, everything that has to do with ischemic heart disease, including angina as well as a myocardial infarction. Back pain is also connected to this, everything that has to do with hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, erectile dysfunction, which is an early sign of maybe cardiovascular disease or vascular disease overall, chronic wounds, as well as gout, neuropathies, exacerbation of diabetes. Incredibly, diabetes type 2 can really go away on a whole food plant-based diet regimen instead of having a lot of what we get on the Western diet. In diabetes type 1, there's usually a decrease in insulin requirements of about a 30 to 40%, depending on the cases. Peripheral vascular disease, a lot of the colitis issues from irritable bowel syndrome to Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, gastric ulcer, as well as asthma. So you have, as I was saying before, we really understand the connection between animal-based protein as well as all of these conditions. And so does our former president. The interesting thing that we found by watching his videos is that he mentioned once and over and again that he did all the research. Now, can you imagine he needed bypass surgery? And not only did he need bypass surgery, but a stent. And he was probably the #1 top guy ingesting all that Western diet and animal protein-based diet. And while he started to try to do all this research, trying to figure out what he could do after he needed the bypass, he mentions actually Drs. Campbell and Dr. Esselstyn during his interview. So that's very interesting. Now, back to my dad. In July of 2015, early July, he started the whole food plant-based nutrition. And as you can see, he doesn't seem to be very happy here, right? But he is eating a really whole dish of a very nutritious diet. Now, what does this mean? What is this diet all about? Well, basically, we eat plants. We do not eat any animal protein. So we don't eat any meat, chicken, fish, eggs, milk products, or their derivatives. And we also add no salt, oils, or sugars. This is basically what all the diet is about. This is it. If you want to remember one thing from this presentation, this is what you can do, you and your family, to protect yourself from any of the other conditions that I mentioned before. Now, coming to September of 2015, my dad's treatment has included the whole food plant-based nutrition. He has continued to receive his infusions, so he's receiving the monoclonal antibodies. He walks about 5 miles a day, so there's a lot of physical activity for him. He does some light gardening. We just want to make sure that he's okay with some of the lesions that we had found. There's a lot of prayer and affirmations. One of the affirmations that we discussed and that I honestly suggested was to focus on replacing the tissue with the right tissue. So focusing on replacing liver to liver, bone to bone, lung to lung, skin to skin. That was the idea. And a lot of family support, of course. Now, after 3 months on the diet, he has lost 20 pounds, about 10 kilograms. He's normalized his blood pressure. He's not taking his antihypertensive medications at all. He also stopped the medication for cholesterol. His cholesterol level was already on the lower side anyways, although it was recommended that he stay on the anti-cholesterol medications just because he had the stent. But because, you know, he feels very confident and comfortable that he doesn't need the medications anymore, he really stopped taking those. And he feels great. He has a lot of energy, and he's been able to walk. He's been able to walk for the past 3 months. He goes and comes, and he usually walks anywhere from anywhere really from 5 to 10 kilometers a day, which would be anywhere from 2 to 5 miles a day. So here he is now standing and really surrounded by all these fruits and vegetables. Now he has a good smile on his face. He really is feeling great in very many ways, and you can see that he's really lost quite a bit of weight from the time that you saw with him, me with him at Disney. Now let me get a little bit more into what is whole food plant-based nutrition. So basically, we are plantivores. We eat plants. We eat whole fruits, whole vegetables, whole grains, as well as whole legumes. That is what we eat, or a combination of the above. But this is really pretty much it. You have different types. These are just some examples. You can find whatever examples you really like for yourself and your family, but this is really what we eat. We really try not to replace what we ate before with things that remind us of how meat tasted like before, or cheese or stuff like that, unless there's nutritious value in eating those things as well. So we are plantivores again. If you have cardiovascular disease, you really have to be careful with avocados and nuts. Not that they're not good, the thing is they have a lot of fat in them. So if you have cardiovascular disease, you should be careful about not overeating them. Oil, salt, these are out. Caffeine is out as well because it also provokes inflammation of the vessels, and what you're trying to do is to de-inflame, to really bring all that endothelial cells within those vessels to run, to be as healthy as possible, so that our blood flow, our oxygenation, and all those nutrients can go effectively wherever they need to go from head to toes. Also, avoid juices and smoothies. You can use them as part of your cooking, but Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Campbell are really big about promoting that we eat food overall, and not just feed on juices. So unfortunately, what I've seen is many people live on juices or smoothies and they're not really eating the whole food. The difference is in its nutritional value. The whole fruit or vegetable has a higher nutritional value as compared to the sliced one, as compared to the juice one. And the other thing is that usually if you juice things that are kind of sugary, you will also spike your insulin levels, and you don't want to do that. That's really not healthy for you. So that's one of the reasons. Refined flour goes out altogether, but we eat pasta and bread and everything that has to do with whole grain. So it's not a problem for us. I eat pasta almost every day. I love pasta. I love pizza. And so I'm happy eating all of that every day. And we really leave added sugars, and we also avoid artificial sweeteners. Those are out as well. Now, your whole food plant-based diet is about 80% of carbohydrates, 10% of protein, and 10% of fat. I know you're going to get a lot of folks going like, how can you survive on such little fat or protein at all? And well, basically, not only do we if you look at Doctors Campbell and Esselstyn, they've been on this diet for about 30 years, but I think that there's something even more interesting in regards to their stories, as well as if you also look at Dr. McDougall, their kids are now physicians advocating this same lifestyle. They're on the diet themselves, and their kids are on the diet as well. So I thought that that was particularly telling to not only see Drs. Campbell, Esselstyn, as well as Dr. McDougall being on this diet, but having their kids and their grandkids on the diet as well. That's, again, very telling. All of us really want our kids and grandkids and all our descendants to do well and survive. That is just a part of that inner instinct. And so I thought that was very interesting. Now, for this diet, we do take vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is stored in our liver, and it can be stored for 2 or 3 years. So we usually take vitamin B12 levels on a baseline, as well as vitamin D on a baseline level, to see if we need to replace it. Now, I live in Miami, so I can be exposed to the sun in moderate quantities, so that's not a major issue for me. But if you live up north or too south in the globe, then you may need to take some oral replacement for vitamin D. Now, we are healthy plantivores, as you can see, and this in a nutshell puts all of what being a plantivore is about. Now, what it is not about is about being a carnivore. And what you see this is that we really eliminated animal protein from our diet. We do not eat meat, chicken, poultry, fish, or seafood. We do not eat eggs. We do not drink milk. And we do not eat any of the dairy products. No butter, cheese, cream, ice cream, or yogurt. We just don't do it. We are not carnivores. We avoid processed foods. We read labels. It's very important to read labels. There are some fantastic YouTube videos from Dr. Jeff Novick talking about how to read a label. Those are fantastic. Try to get a hold of them as well. So you have to look for nutritional value. Every 100 calories that you will find in foods, you can take up to 15 or 20 at the most of fat. And if you have cardiovascular disease, you may want to keep that at around 15. Per 100 calories, you can have up to 100 milligrams of sodium. And be careful, because sometimes you will see a product that sounds or looks like it's very healthy, but when you look at the amount of sodium, it may be 10 times more. So you may find 100 calories and 1,000 of sodium. And the third one is always look for fiber. You want to have at least 2 or 3 grams of fiber whenever you eat anything. And if you're eating something that's high on carbohydrates, but it has no fiber, then it's probably refined. So you want to take a look at that, and this is one of the main reasons why we don't add any sugar or to our diet. Now, watch out for milk, eggs, oils, whey, refined flour, or added sugars and processed products. You're going to see this in breads, you can see it in pasta, so be careful. You have to You have to read the labels. And even if you've been reading the labels and if they change the product in some shape or form, reread it. Don't just assume that they haven't changed anything, because people can get tricky with that. Watch out also for the no fat label. If it's oil, it's 100% fat. So any of the sprays that you see to cook healthy with 0% fat, it's really not so. Again, Dr. Novick has a very nice video explaining this in detail. So these are some of the references that were so significant in my path to health and wellness. And I would love to share these with you so that you can also read as much as you want and internalize yourself into this very interesting world. Forks over knives, it makes it so easy to just watch this documentary in about an hour and a half, watch it with your family, just like I did, and start off with that. That may be the easiest way to get started. Read the China study, particularly if you've dealt with cancer or if you have family members with cancer. That may be a good way to get started as well. All of us have known people with heart disease or brain disease, such as having problems with stroke or Alzheimer's disease. So you really want to read Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by Dr. Esselstyn. Now there's so many books and videos. Read those from Drs. John McDougall, Neil Barnard, Doug Lisle, Jeff Novick, Michael Greger, and more. There are some people that advocate for certain things, but be careful if some folks say, don't eat this or that type of plants. In this diet, you're supposed to eat everything that you want to eat, really, that is natural fruit or vegetable. Dr. Campbell talks about a symphony of food, not giving any particular power to any one kind of food, and that's one of the main characteristics of this diet. Now, in your case, I would also suggest ask your doctor about embracing a whole food plant-based nutrition lifestyle, and make dietary and lifestyle changes under the supervision of a qualified physician. Why is this so important? As soon as you start on this diet, your cholesterol level will drop. So if you're on statins, it may not be a big deal if cholesterol drops, but your blood pressure will drop as well. So if you're taking antihypertensive medications and your blood pressure drops, you may feel dizzy or you may feel somewhat weak. And so it's very important that you try to avoid doing these things on your own. The blood pressure drops really fast within a week or two. So if you've struggled all your life with obesity or being overweight in some shape or form, plus having high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or type 2 diabetes, consider this diet because it could be life-saving for you and for your family. So this is our story. What is yours? I hope you enjoy longevity and health and wellness, and this ends part 1. If you'd like to have more information, please visit executivewellness.com. Thank you so much for joining me.